Welcome to Under the Microscope. I am your host, Jenny Germano. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This is our first episode of 2026, so Happy New Year to everyone. And before I dive into this topic, I just want to give a little bit about my background. I got my start working in the cannabis industry in 2009, running vertically integrated cannabis operations. And then for the last 10 years, I have been consulting nationally, helping operators navigate all the regulatory challenges that they face across the United States. So today's topic is building momentum for 2026 and how smart marketing fuels cannabis operator growth. And I can't think of a better person to join me today and to help me tackle this topic is Cassie Tomaselli, and she is the founder and creative director of Tomaselli Media and the Green Room. Welcome, Cassie.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenny. I can't wait to talk with you about all things marketing and PR.
I'm very happy that you're here, and thanks for being my first guest for 2026. That's really exciting. I can't think of anyone better to help me start the new year than you. And why don't you go ahead and give our listeners a little bit about your background and then how you came into the cannabis industry?
Yeah, again, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat. And I've been in the cannabis industry a little over 8 years now, almost 9. I started by way of trade journalism. So I worked for one of the major cannabis publications for a number of years. I was also a director of marketing for one of the first vertically integrated operators here in Ohio. And
Oh,
about three
cool.
years ago, I started my own consultancy called Tomaselli Media, where we help plant touching and ancillary cannabis businesses in our industry with things like content marketing, social, email marketing, increasingly now public relations and thought leadership. From there, I created the Green Room, which is the industry's first personal branding and thought leadership membership for professionals in the space. So I'm excited to talk about that more as well.
I love it. We met a long time ago. This is crazy.
Mhm.
Some people
Yeah.
listening might remember the Seed to Sales show that was put on by NCIA in Denver. And that, I don't know if you remember that. That's where I first met you.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, it must have been a long time
It
ago
was a
then.
long time ago. He was at the convention center in Denver, and they would have the Seed to Sales show for a long time. It was in Colorado. And then I think
Yeah.
it believe it must have moved to California or something like that afterwards. But
Yeah.
that was the first time I met you was in Denver at that
Whoa.
show.
Wow, my goodness. Yeah, it's been some time then.
And it has
A
been.
lot has
I know.
changed.
Eh, the industry has changed, and yeah, and nobody ever has events anymore in Colorado.
That's
There's
true. That's true. Although I did hear a lot of people at MJ Biz say maybe Denver could be a good place to have it again
I think,
there one day.
honestly, it would be incredible if they moved MJ BizCon to Denver because it's more centrally located for people to get to, and I think it would be a nice change, I think, for MJ BizCon. That's what I'm hearing from a lot of people too, that they're wishing or saying they're hoping it moves to Denver.
Yeah,
Who
any
knows?
excuse I get to go back to Denver, I'll take it.
Yeah, there's a lot to do. We have consumption lounges now, and it's definitely changed a lot. I think just diving in and setting people up for success in 2026, I thought we'd talk a little bit about some marketing fundamentals for cannabis operators. And what are some unique challenges that cannabis operators face when it comes to marketing compared to some of these other regulated industries or just even non regulated industries?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because one of the first challenges that comes to mind is the regulation. And it depends on where your business is in the country a lot of times too. Like, for example, I live in Ohio and the marketing restrictions are so much stricter than they are in other states where I have a client in New Jersey and they don't have to deal with half the things that we have to here in my state. For example, you have to submit anything you use for marketing, whether it's print collateral, email marketing, social media posts, you have to submit that to the state in advance and pay
Wow.
$100 for them. And then they have 30 days to review it. So it just makes marketing decisions really difficult, and it's hard to quickly react to the market when you have that lag instead of retroactively like regulating the market that way. If you see something, then they could potentially impose a fine or restriction or something like that. So that's just one of the many struggles that we deal with in cannabis is the state by state landscape in terms of regulation. But then there's just the restrictions on a lot of the privately owned platforms that so many of us use for other aspects of our lives, like Meta, for example, or Google Ads. It's still extremely restrictive to cannabis companies. People still get shadow banned and taken down all the time. There's certain email marketing providers that won't be friendly to cannabis, text message marketing, because cannabis is federally illegal, runs into lots of issues as well. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest hurdles to just getting people to know about cannabis products and services, even ancillary services that don't touch the plant.
Wow. Yeah, I know it is definitely a challenge for everyone. I have brand new operators who have launched and they were like, our Meta page or our Instagram was shut down. And we just started it 2 weeks ago, and they're struggling to figure out, we're a dispensary, how do we do this? Struggling to navigate, and these are people who have never even worked in the industry before, and they're just so confused and challenged on how to navigate this landscape with advertising and marketing. And I did not know that was going on in Ohio. So the $100, is that like their administrative fee?
Yes.
Oh
So
my
so when
gosh.
and this is still the case from even before when I was working in the space, we would have to just try to batch as much as possible and send it over to them so they could review everything within one submission. But yeah, it makes it hard because if they don't approve the collateral or the digital marketing or the packaging or whatever it is, they have 30 days to approve it. And then if you go forward and use it, if they don't get back to you within 30 days, they can retroactively disapprove it and fine you. So you're really stuck at the mercy
Holy
of the
cow.
program. But yeah, and of course, some of those things can feel subjective at times. But that's the reality that we live in. In a lot of ways, it's really important for us to have really responsible marketing in our space because there's a lot of irresponsible marketing in our space, to be quite honest.
Yeah,
And to talk about to make claims that that any other supplement company probably wouldn't be able to make that wasn't approved by the FDA or anything
true.
like that. We need to be extremely careful. So much of that is warranted, but a lot of the systems can be really clunky for operators that are just trying to run their business compliantly.
Wow. I can't even believe that. And not only that, the 30 days after you submit, you have to create content that essentially become irrelevant by the time they review it and it gets approved. You know what I'm saying? If you're doing like specials or whatever it is that you're allowed to do, it sounds like Ohio is very strict in what they allow you to do, but that's got to be extremely challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it really hard to plan ahead or act quickly in the moment. And you know how fast SKUs can change over. You test a product, it doesn't work, you need to pivot, and it's a very fast moving industry. Yeah, those kinds of things can be really challenging.
Another thing I want to talk about is how does developing a brand voice help a cannabis business stand out?
That's a great question. And I think you hear this a lot in the industry is that we don't have enough great brands. We have a lot of brands, but we don't have a lot of great brands. Cannabis is very commoditized. It's almost like we've done it to ourselves in a certain way. Like we up the THC as much as possible, and then you teach everyone to shop just for the lowest price for the highest milligram. That not only just pushes out people in the market that aren't looking for the highest potency product, but it also just teaches people not to be brand loyal at all. So there's nothing to say that if you create something and then your competitor creates it, like what makes you stand out? And good branding is one way to do that. So developing a brand voice, finding your target customer, trying not to be everything to everyone, and really honing in and creating that loyalty is going to be the thing that helps you when prices continue to commoditize and cannabis becomes more widespread and more competitors enter the space. That's your key to standing out.
I think that's really helpful, and it is true that everyone shops for different reasons. People shop based on their bank account.
Mhm.
Other people who are loyal to brands because they like that particular brand, or there's people who just come in and buy whatever's on sale. and they just rotate from brand to brand. There's people who are connoisseurs. There's all types of customers. I also too think hopefully we could start moving away from the high THC. For someone like me, I don't like high THC anymore. 10 years ago, I loved it. That's all I consumed. But as I've gotten older, I've actually pulled back the high THC products. And now I just like a little amount of THC and I like the one to ones and stuff like that. And so I think people evolve and change their consumption and what they buy and what works for them as people age and get older, and so I think that's also something important to think about.
I think you're right. And I'm a young woman in my 30s, and a lot of my girlfriends feel the exact same way. Like
Yeah.
they're young mothers, and we have beautiful dispensaries here in Ohio, but they still feel intimidated going into the dispensary and talking to somebody about cannabis because it feels very, I'm not going to say elitist, but it's if you don't have a certain level of base knowledge, it's really hard for you to make product selections, or the product selections that you're looking for are just not available. And I think this is also something it's like a chicken or the egg conversation
Yeah.
sometimes, where it's if you talk to operators and you're seeing this data even bear out in the hemp beverage space, like people are looking for a higher dosage, but we're also not marketing to people who would want lower dosage. So we're not seeing it in the numbers, but I think it's because we're not actively trying to reach those people. We're just offering this SKU, but we're not doing anything to really bring those people into our orbit.
I think a good example is really the hemp market. They don't have to go into the dispensary and be intimidated. They can just go online and have it delivered to their house, and it's low THC. And I think that is giving that inside look to what's going on. And at least on the marijuana side of the industry, the regulated THC side, that people need to start thinking about getting those people to cross back over and to not be intimidated and to come into their dispensaries. Let's get some low THC items in here.
Yes, and to make sure that you're doing something to get those people in the door. And
Yeah.
because that's the harder thing. I think once you try to get people in the door, you are going to find a market for it. But if you're not advertising to those people, they're never going to find you.
Yeah, that's so true. Another thing I wanted to talk about is what role does organic content play versus paid ads? Platforms often restrict paid ads, and I'm not sure where you can do paid ads. Maybe LinkedIn might be the only place.
LinkedIn is definitely easier than others. And again, I don't specialize in paid ads, but I work with others who do.
Yeah,
So based on my experience there working adjacently with those folks, there are ways to get around some of the meta restrictions. Again, if you're being careful, there are companies like Surfside, for example, that have done really great work on like the programmatic side. But it is still difficult. It is still like this workaround process because these platforms, they don't tolerate anything that's federally illegal, of course,
yeah,
which makes sense. But it makes it really difficult for our industry. So that's why organic content is even more and more important. There's such a need to educate the audience. I think sometimes us in the industry, we forget how little people know about cannabis and how much education is still required to get people
so
like
true.
into our orbit. We still need to explain the difference between THC and CBD. We need to do it over and over again. And now these new cannabinoids that are emerging in products, what's the entourage effect? How do terpenes work? You can do your best to do that, and people are still going to kind of shop by THC percentage and price. So it really requires like a culture shift to do that. But you can't do that without creating organic content. Think about creating blogs for your website. Email marketing is probably what I would say is like the best route to get in front of your customers. Use every other platform you can get to route people to your email list, because that's an owned list that you have that nobody can just shut down at their will. And I think creating those opportunities, and especially now, even more like getting earned media, thought leadership, developing a personal brand along with your company brand, all of those things are really important to just raise awareness for your products and services. And again, this applies both for plant touching and ancillary businesses.
I think it's true. I'm seeing more and more CEOs or founders of dispensaries out there, even manufacturing or on the regulated side, where they're doing more of that thought leadership and they're getting out there in the public eye versus just the dispensary name or the brand name. They're doing both.
Hmm.
And so I thought that was pretty interesting. I think it's true that email marketing is a really smart way to go. You have to get creative in the industry and how you're marketing yourself and branding your company.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I completely agree. You do have to think outside the box.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about, and interesting enough, it was about email marketing. Are there anything like email marketing through like MailChimp, or is that what you're talking about? Like coming up with different campaigns? Now, is this something they should work with somebody to have them help them create these? Because I hear it can be a little tricky, right? You can get into trouble where you're over spamming. How do people protect themselves, and how do they figure out so they don't get dinged with spamming people with email marketing?
Yeah, so I think just to even take a step back with email marketing, I think the first thing you need to determine is, okay, what am I going to use my email marketing for? Like for an ancillary company, they're not going to be sending daily emails. They're not probably not going to be sending a lot of transaction emails, abandoned
Yeah.
cart, like things like that. Like they probably need like a lighter program than someone who's selling direct products through their newsletter. If you're on the hemp derived side, for example, or what have you. I think you just need to learn what your goals are, and then I think the next thing you need to do is build your list in a really responsible manner, because you
Yes.
can get fined for doing things like signing people up for your newsletter that never subscribe to it. There's a reason that we do double opt-in and things like that. So making sure that you are getting people to opt in to your newsletter by their own volition instead of just uploading lists, because that's the first thing that lands you in a spam folder and could get you in
Yeah.
trouble. The next thing is just to be really strategic about the cadence and how often you're sending people emails, and just be consistent about it whenever you do choose that route. So if you send a weekly email, send a weekly email. If you are a daily email provider, like that's okay. Know that you probably will get a little bit of unsubscribe rate at first, but like you also get more opens and views, and depending on what you're promoting, like daily can be okay as well. Just thinking through that strategy a little bit. And then, yeah, there are certain just rules that you can look up online that you need to just make sure that you're abiding by, like providing like an address in the footer and a way for people to unsubscribe easily, and some of these other things that can help you stay compliant in your email marketing. But I would say it's worth investing in someone to help you figure
Yeah.
that out, because it can take a lot of time otherwise, and it can be one of those things that falls off the back burner, but you don't want it to, because email provides an average of $36 return for every dollar spent on it.
Wow.
So it's a really high ROI tool. So if you use it correctly and you nurture your audience, and again, it's not subject to the whims of Meta, or if LinkedIn decides that one day they want to restrict cannabis content, we're just like at their mercy when we use those platforms. But when you have a list, you have an owned list that you can download, and you can move to another platform if you need to, or find another way to communicate with people using their email, as long as you've acquired those emails compliantly.
I can't tell you how many times I get these random newsletters and I've never subscribed. It's nonstop and I unsubscribe all the time. And I don't like when people email me weekly. I unsubscribe if I get hit weekly, but I guess it works for some people if they're selling products and you're purchasing from that company and you want the sales and the discounts. It really just depends the situation and the experience, but I am an avid unsubscriber. I put a newsletter out once a month that when people unsubscribed, I don't really get upset and I just let people subscribe onto my
Mhm.
email list. So it is challenging because it's true. Like you can just randomly add people and you can risk getting that account suspended or, like you said, fined, or I
Mhm.
don't know if they restrict. I don't know. I've never done it myself, so I'm not really sure all the not fun things that happen to people that do that.
Yeah, yeah. Depending on what you violate, yeah, you could potentially get fined. The biggest thing that happens is just you're going to people's spam folders, and then
Oh, yeah.
you're going to get a bad rating, and your deliverability will be off.
Oh,
That's
okay.
probably the biggest and most immediate problem that a lot of people face, because if you're just blasting to thousands and thousands of people that you've never blasted to before, it's like the first sign that you're gonna get hit with something. So building like a list that grows organically is a good thing.
Yeah, that's wild. So how should a cannabis operator balance, like, posting educational content versus promotional? And I would say more for operators. A lot of the operators listen to this podcast, so How should they balance that kind of educational content versus kind of promoting, and also promoting their business has gotta be tricky too, because once you start posting sales or specials or, pictures of cannabis, then you're really challenged because your post or whatnot can get flagged.
Yeah, I would recommend, this is on the social media side. I would
Yeah,
recommend that nobody's really posting a lot of product photos.
yeah,
It's the first thing that can get you shut down. Even using the word dispensary can get you shut down. That's another way to just build your brand, right? Like you can create content around education, you can create an advertising campaign, you could do storytelling. There are lots of different ways that you can harness social media. Again, there's always a risk, but if you're building like a culture and a community more than just spamming people with sales, like that's going to get people to engage with your content better anyway.
yeah.
And if you look at some of the biggest brands out there, Coca-Cola is not saying go to Kroger's and buy this 6-pack for whatever of Mexican Coke for whatever amount. They're building a brand feeling and they're bringing people into a community and they're creating an identity and all of those kinds of things. And that's really what you should probably be using your social media most for, and use it to drive people to your email newsletter where you can make more of those direct promotional,
Yeah.
as long as it's is depending on how you're operating and depending on your state regulations, doing that compliantly, that's where you can make a more transactional ask.
That's kind of the most interesting I saw in 2025 is that a couple dispensaries were using Reddit as a way to market their dispensary and then having people talk about strains or terpenes and all the different things. I'd never seen that before, and maybe it's been going on for a long time. I do not use Reddit. One of my clients was like, "Oh yeah, we're using Reddit and it's going great."
That's interesting that your client is using it so successfully, because from my experience with Reddit, they don't want you to be advertising your business on that platform. Like it's
Yeah.
supposed to be like a user engagement and they don't want to like dilute that. The fact that they're using that successfully, that's very interesting to hear.
Yeah, maybe they're just lucky. I don't really
Could
know.
be.
There's some people who never have issues with Meta or anything like that. My Facebook account's been shut down. Don't really do anything on Instagram anymore. I've been flagged so many times. I do not post pictures of product, but if you use the word cannabis or anything like that, it's gotten a lot smarter because the AI has improved. I had somebody that had a pot leaf shirt on and they flagged that image, which I thought was like, wow, they can actually see the pot leaf on the t-shirt. That is wild stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting, especially since Meta early last year came out with guidance that said that they were going to be a little more lax with it. But it seems as though, at least from what I've heard, is that the opposite has happened.
I haven't
um,
seen any lax. I still see
yeah.
people posting probably once a week somebody's account is getting shut down. And people who have had 30, 50,000 followers, 10, 15 years of building up people following. Yeah.
And sometimes you can get it back and sometimes you can't. So it really is a big gamble. And that's why I tell people, like, you should have social media because it's important to have a presence, because it helps you appear legitimate and it helps you connect with people, but use it to drive people to your email newsletter.
Yeah.
Like that should be like, use it to build community and drive people to the newsletter.
I
I have a
like
client
that.
right now that we have a post on their stories going up every week that drives people to the newsletter. And like, it's just, we just found different ways to say it over and over again.
I
And that's
love
what they
that.
do, because and they have an engaged audience and a high open rate because they are people that want that information. They want to subscribe to that newsletter to get more, or to learn where the pop-ups are going to be, or to learn what like about the new strains that are dropping or what have you.
What is a high open rate? Is it like above 30%?
I would say anything over like the 20s is good for the consumer newsletter. That's like the industry standard, and it tends to be a little bit higher for a B2B newsletter.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
No, that makes me excited. Mine's around 34, 35. So
And because you're B2B, that makes a lot of sense.
and I just do
Mhm.
once a month. I don't get too many unsubscribers. It's different for everyone. Well, kinda wanna tackle thought leadership and credibility, and why is thought leadership valuable for cannabis businesses? Because I don't really think people think about, "Oh, my cannabis business, I should be thinking about thought leadership." They don't put those 2 things together.
Yeah, I think it's just incredibly important in our industry. So that way we can be good stewards of our industry, but we can also do a lot of trust building through thought leadership as well. So if it's the brand, if it's on the plant touching side, if it's the brand owner talking about their experience with cannabis and telling that story, if they want that kind of personal persona associated with their brand, thought leadership's a great way to do that. And especially on the ancillary side, I think it's important because I think a lot of cannabis businesses have been burned and they need good people to work with, and thought leadership can help you build that credibility
Oh,
and
yeah.
attract people to you. That's one of the biggest reasons why I started the Green Room, because I found that I'd say I've worked with mainly ancillary companies in the space, and a lot of them, they either fall into two camps. Either one, they're this best kept secret in the industry and they didn't really have like a formal pipeline set up. Everything's kind of done through referrals and they have a good track record and they're amazing at their craft and what they do. But then when that word of mouth goes away, then their leads are gone and then they're scrambling, right?
Yeah.
So you have that kind of side of things. And then you have other people who are not afraid to like get out there, but they just don't know how to do it and they don't know what to talk about, or it's I've got everything up here, but I'm not a good writer, or I want to approach the media, but I don't know how to do it without sounding too promotional or what have you. So I created the Green Room earlier this year, which is a personal branding and thought leadership membership for cannabis executives and rising professionals to help teach them how to do that, and then also bring in the media to meet with them and to tell them exactly what they're looking for. So it helps them build that skill set and teach them how to pitch. And then it also puts them in front of the people who are making those decisions. And so they can build those relationships themselves.
It's smart too because then the media is not trying to track down their resources that they're looking for, to whether they're talking or interviewing or quoting someone in an article. And it's here's this group of people. I know I'm going to find somebody that are going to meet the needs of that resource that I'm looking for, whether it's that article or that quote and whatnot. And I think too, how could it benefit? I know you said a lot of people are ancillary companies, but how could it benefit a cannabis operator, the green room? Because they might think, "Oh, I don't have a lot of time to do that," or "I've got a lot going on." But why would the face of that cannabis operation be important? Why would it benefit someone like that?
Yeah, I think it's just important not to be like a faceless entity these days because I think
Yeah.
people connect with people and cannabis is still so new that people just don't trust it as much. So I think it's important to have those personal brands established, but also it's beyond just getting people to come in and buy our products. It's like this, if you're someone that wants to one day lift a moratorium in a city that you want to operate in, if you're talking to the media and you're a trusted resource of somebody who knows their stuff as it comes to cannabis, you can do a lot of that through thought leadership, whether that's like getting on
Mm.
your local TV station or radio. There's still just so much stigma as it relates to cannabis. I was even on a public radio interview a couple years ago, and the interviewer, all they wanted to talk to me about was like kids and cannabis. And uh, she didn't say this exactly, but it was someone with the school of thought of these are the people putting cannabis in kids like Halloween bags
Yeah.
and like those kinds of like fear-based messages and trying to combat that. Like a business owner can do a lot to combat some of that stigma and to talk about how teen use actually goes down in states where cannabis is legalized and all these things that we know collectively as an industry, but can be educating the public about. So in many ways, it's not just this is open or our brand is here and this is what we do. Like all of that is important too, but it can also just help further the industry and further your business if you're participating in the media community.
I think you can sell without selling. Basically, you can make an impact in your community and
Mhm.
not try to sell anything. I think that being a good thought leader and doing things in the community and educating and putting out that information and diluting the fear that some people might have because they don't have enough context or they don't know enough or they don't have enough information or maybe they're not even researching it. And people have to understand a lot of times everyone's in a silo and they've got a lot going on in their own
Mhm.
universe that for us, it's cannabis. For me, it's 24/7, but I have to remember it's not like that for everyone else. and so they might
Mhm.
not understand. So I think that's where you can have that impact, and it will sell itself. I think if you're authentic and genuine and you do impactful things like that, maybe you're getting quoted locally for something going on in your state, you could make a difference.
Yeah, that's such a great point, and it's a theme that we talk about a lot in the green room. Like the green room really, it's a personal branding and thought leadership membership, but it's not about self-aggrandizing or saying I'm a thought leader or posturing and things like that. It really is about serving. And as long as you come to any pitch or any media opportunity or anything like that with the intention to serve an audience, then that's how you're going to win.
Yeah.
So that's what we teach a lot of people. That's what we teach people in the green room to do. It's not just look at me and look how great I am. It's these are the lessons that I've learned, or here are the takeaways that I have that could help other people, and framing it from that perspective. Because that's really what the media wants anyway. They don't want you to be promotional. They want you to tell a story, or they want you to share insights that are going to be helpful for the broader industry or the broader community.
Yeah. I actually really like that because I think a lot of times it can feel promotional in the cannabis industry. It feels like a lot of the pay to play kind of thing. So I like that perspective.
Yeah, I don't want to say that pay to play doesn't exist in our
Yeah.
space because it certainly does, but I think people would be really surprised by how much pay to play or how much pay to play does not factor into
Yeah.
what gets chosen for an event program or an article mention or things like that because people are just looking for genuinely good content. And the thing is that a lot of newsrooms are shrinking aboard in all types of media, even cannabis. And so people need help creating that content. And if there's somebody that they can trust and rely on that's going to provide value to their audience, that's going to be a good thing. So learning how to approach the media to be helpful in that way, I think is also going to be really important if you want to get ahead and get more visibility.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, actually. I'm learning a lot just like talking with you about this, and hopefully listeners are learning a lot too, because I think there's a perception around if you spend all this money, you're going to get the speaking, you're going to get the quote, you're going to get the interview, and that's not always true.
No, that's not always true. If you come with a good idea, that's what's going to help you get picked up. That, like I said, I'm not going to say that it doesn't exist, or I'm not going to say that you won't get pitched later on by a salesperson after you make
Sure.
a successful media hit or something like that. And by the way, I want to mention that it is really important to support our cannabis trades because they provide really valuable information to our industry
Mhm.
and they provide a huge service. They provide a lot of perspective. Think about when the rescheduling news happened, like we
Oh
all
my
went to the
gosh.
media to read about it, right? We need to support those publications so that they can do that breaking news, that they can get those perspectives, that they can keep us informed, not just on big events, but everything in our industry from how to raise capital in this kind of environment to how to run your business more effectively to how do you interact with your state regulators and all of these things that we need to learn as business owners and operators to succeed in this space. And but the good thing is that there's lots of ways to support cannabis media. It's not just write a big hefty check. And a lot of the editors and event organizers who have come to the green room have shared tons of ways that no matter what your budget is, you can support cannabis media. So I think keeping that in perspective is important. But is it required? No. A lot of these outlets are truly journalistic. So if you come to them with a good idea that's timely, that's relevant, that's something that they believe their audience will resonate with, you have a very good shot of getting in. A lot of people just don't know how to pitch.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's a problem. I was an editor for years. I was on the other side of those pitches for years, and it's like people didn't understand like what our publication did. They would pitch us consumer style things for an industry publication, or they would pitch something that was either too novice or too advanced for what our audience was looking for, or it was just too promotional. It's like, if only you knew how to structure this, that's like we could get you somewhere, but I don't have the time to teach you how to do that because editors' inboxes are flooded. So that's what we try to teach people in the grade room. It's like, how do you cut through that inbox noise to get a hold of an editor or to build a relationship with an editor that's not just transactional, but like a real relationship?
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I would say that's true with a lot of things. Like even on LinkedIn, trying to sell me grow lights, and I don't own a grow. Like I get some of the weirdest messages on LinkedIn, and I'm thinking, did they even read my LinkedIn profile? I don't own that type of company. I find that happens a lot. It totally makes sense that people are doing that. And another thing too, I think the media really is important in the cannabis industry because we need a way to get information. Obviously, podcasts is great and
Mhm.
interviews are great, but it's important. I still read a lot of the media. That's how I get my news for the cannabis industry. It's more than just listening to podcasts. And I like reading articles. And of course, I go to the state websites and I read content or information that they put out, but also trade shows. I love trade shows. If I could
Me
do
too.
trade shows for the rest of my life, it's just my jam. I think it's like the best experience, and I'm a little sad that it's dwindling, but there are pockets of really good trade shows still happening. Obviously,
Oh, yeah.
it's not 2019 where it was, and I think the market's just adapting right now.
Mhm.
And so I think it is important to support the trade shows too because I have some of my best experiences at trade shows. I might not have always have gotten a client from a trade show, but I've made incredible connections, built incredible relationships for my business, and those relationships or those connections have gotten me in front of new clients. So you just
Mhm.
never know how it's going to happen, and they're just helpful, and there's still people that go to trade shows, so it is important to support them.
Oh yeah, 1,000%. A trade show can give you a very quick ROI, or it can have a long tail ROI for you as
Yeah,
well. I have a client that spoke at an industry event and then messaged me back 6 months later and said, so and so saw me speak at this thing and they were finally ready for this service and they reached out to me and they saw me 6 months ago. So that's like really
that's
powerful right
amazing.
there. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It's where we go to have those candid conversations about the industry. We see what's working for people, what's not working for people. We see where trends are evolving. All of those kinds of things are really important. And you're right. I think the event landscape is really shifting. You know,
Is
when I first started, everybody was trying to become a big national show and be everybody's everything. And then people started going into lanes of, okay, you'll be the grow show and I'll be the retail show and I'll be the science show and I'll be the banking show.
it's so
And then it's
true.
kind of moved now into like regional plays and markets, especially there are markets that are struggling and then there are markets that are new. So people are going to the markets that are new. But I'm really glad that the cannabis industry is moving more regionally now because it's able to bring more people into the fold. Whereas, like, normally from Ohio, you probably wouldn't send your whole team to Vegas or Seattle or wherever. But if you have a local trade show and like your that's a 2-hour drive away, you can send a lot more people to it and get a lot more value out of it. And those relationships can be deeper. So that's also a really good thing, I think. I work on the Ohio Cannabis Health and Business Summit with Lenny Berry, and he's just so amazing at creating community in our cannabis space. I can't say enough good things about Lenny and what he's built, but that's something that I love to watch evolve every year is just how the cannabis industry is maturing and coming together and using that event as like an anchor throughout the year to build those relationships.
It's true. I think the regional trade shows are really becoming successful, and I hope to see one come back to Colorado and to Denver, honestly. The cannabis industry in Denver metropolitan area or Colorado in general, they are really hungry for events. Right now, we just have a lot of local events and
Yeah.
happy hours. And those are
Mhm.
great too. We have the National Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, and they host like a monthly happy hour. Most people that I talk to, they really want events to come back here. And I know we're not going to get a lot, but it would be wonderful to have it because I think it could do well. Like I said, I think people are hungry. You have all new set of employees in the industry. You have to remember when events were crazy popular here in Colorado, a lot of those employees have left the industry or they've started their own businesses. We have a whole new set
Mhm.
of employees in the cannabis industry here in Colorado. And there's a lot of like local events that are geared towards employees, like bud tender events, but they haven't really experienced a lot of the larger regional events that Colorado used to have. We used to have the Indo Expo
Oh,
here
that's
back in
right.
the do
Yeah.
you remember that?
Mhm.
Yeah, the Indo
Mhm.
Expo was
Yeah.
incredible. That had a great run here. The Seed to Sale show, NCIA used to do a lot of big events here, and so the landscape has changed. We had even I think we had CanaCon come here a couple times, and it will be interesting to see what happens. I think 2026 is gonna be about change and
Yeah.
adapting, and So who knows? Something could happen. We could get events back here in 2026 or 2027. We'll see what happens in the market. But I think the challenges for these more mature markets is they don't really get a lot of show action anymore. Even New Mexico, I don't know if you remember, I think it was a couple years ago, everyone was flocking to New Mexico for all these shows, and now there's
Yeah.
not much going on anymore.
Yeah, and maybe it's just that it's a good thing to talk about this because maybe the event setup needs to change
Mhm.
where it's okay, you have this big expo where all of these big capital expenditure kind of equipment comes in and sets
Yeah.
up and maybe someone in Colorado isn't making those huge capex moves right now, but one thing that I think Marijuana Venture has been doing is these like bud tender and or like buyer and brand meetups
Oh, yeah, yeah.
that have been like successful for them because there's still a lot of brands, there's still a lot of transaction that's happening in the market. Could you set up something like that as an event? So maybe it just doesn't look like your typical huge trade show, but there's
It's
still a lot of
true.
value in finding other ways to bring people together in an event platform that's bigger than like a local happy hour.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love those buyer brand markets. I think they're incredible. I always try to push new operators or anyone that's launching to go to those events. We used to have a lot of them back in the day in Colorado. They used to be held at Cultivated Synergy. They were incredible. You could go in and get wind of the newest brand coming onto the market and get in front of it. They're just starting them back up, and I believe Green List recently teamed up and did one out here, but I
Oh,
think
nice.
the feedback or what I'm hearing from people who go to those, they say it's all the big operators like the MSO or the brands that have most of the market in Colorado. We already carry them on our
Mhm.
shelf. We want to get in front of people that we don't even know exist. And so I think that's the key right there is how do you get the people that nobody knows that you exist to come to the table, because the bigger brands don't have a problem spending the money to get to the table. It's the smaller brands. It'd be really cool if they tried to put on more like one for more craft small businesses because they're not really showing up. And that's what the dispensaries are looking for. They already have Wana, they already have Wild, right? They already have Dialed In gummies. They already have the big brands. They're already on their shelf. We're the brands I've never heard of. And it's pretty incredible. I've done a lot of research. There are some really innovative brands, these small micro license or social equity license brands that people have not even heard of, that they don't even realize are available on the market.
That's really interesting because a lot of times you hear, I'm inundated with brand pitches, I don't want any more. But when you hear that people are actually looking for the new and novel, that's really exciting. I hope event organizers are listening and that they
I
can
hope so too.
create those
And
opportunities.
yeah, I hope so too. I think it's a really good idea. And like I said, I think I love that Green List worked on that and put that together. And I think a couple other people have tried in Colorado. But yeah, the biggest complaint I hear is that it's great and it was great to see people, but I didn't see anything I've never seen before. And
Mhm.
so, how do you get the things that you've never seen before to that event?
Or how do you just go deeper with your content and sponsorship? Like, I think there's something to be said about having like roundtable discussions, having nitty gritty cultivation discussions, or retail discussions, or compliance discussions, and creating events around that that maybe just go deeper instead of wider. That could be another way to bring people to the table in this kind of event landscape. Because I think you're right, like 2026 is about change, but it's also about operating as savvy as possible because even though we have this rescheduling news, we don't know when it's going to happen. I think nobody wants to count on it. So we
Yeah.
have to operate in this 280E environment that we're in. What's the best way to do that? So anything that kind of helps us mature our market without any of that help, I think would be beneficial to our industry.
It's once again living and operating and breathing in the unknown. And the only thing that can be known is what you have control of. And that's the cannabis industry. It's been that since I got in it in 2009, and it's always been the unknown. And every year was different, and you never knew what was coming your way. And it's not a matter of if, just when. And that's where we are is everyone's, rescheduling when it happens. This whole thing could be dragged out 2 years. We don't even know. So you still have to just do your best and keep moving forward and keep doing the things that support your brand and your business to be successful and take compliance seriously. And I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think people are ignoring the mature markets, and I think they're missing an opportunity. And I think anyone out there that's listening, but I think every market has a unique opportunity. Emerging markets have one opportunity, and the mature markets, they have needs too. They have things
Mhm.
that they need. A lot of these people need to start pivoting and learning, like, how do I use different platforms? How do I track data in my dispensary? A lot of these businesses weren't doing that in the early days in the mature
Mhm.
markets. And now they're trying to pivot over and find ways to do lean compliance, get more fractional services. So I really
Mhm.
do think that people are overlooking the mature markets, and there's a lot of things that people are looking for. Opportunities still exist. I think people just want the easier opportunities, which is everyone runs to the new emerging market because it's a lot easier to get a return quicker. And I think they look at the mature markets as harder work, maybe.
That's a really great point because, yeah, these markets still have needs. They still have packaging for their products. They still have equipment that breaks down. They still have software upgrades they need to do. They still have hiring and HR issues. And those markets are, like you said, they're mature. So they're taking it to this next level. So, yeah, maybe the next wave is just how do we amplify what we already have?
When you think about it, in these mature markets, you look at Colorado or Massachusetts, New Mexico, and Michigan, you have municipalities that had bans or restrictions and they didn't allow licensing and they're lifting them now. And those people need services. So even though it's a mature market, I helped launch a bunch of dispensaries in Colorado last year. I literally was launching dispensaries for 6 months. And so that goes to show there's still stuff going on. So, like I said, there's still
Yeah.
lots of opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, it may not be the boom that's happening in, like, New York,
Yeah.
for example, but there's still activity.
Yeah. It's not a green rush.
Yeah, that's so important to keep in mind. I think all of us can take something from that.
Think about Ohio or other Midwestern markets. Eventually, they'll become mature and they're going to be faced with the same thing, but the operators will still have needs.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
What are some practical ways cannabis founders can build that personal authority in the industry? Especially if they're like, I find the biggest struggles if they're brand new or, like you said, they were behind the scenes and really not putting themselves out there.
I think telling stories, that's one of the biggest ways. Telling a story of something that you learned from running your business. Talking about a bad investment that you made, if the other
Oh,
side of it now. Talk about a really great hiring decision that you made that's continued to pay off. Talk about how the market has evolved between then and now. Talk about your personal journey, about why you got into cannabis in the first place. There's so many things that we can do as like founder led companies to build that trust and credibility in the space. And also look at overarching trends. Like, what can you add to the discussion that hasn't been talked about yet in terms of that? What can you make people hopeful for?
mm,
I think that's like a big one. I think a lot of people use platforms to be really negative, and I think that can create a lot of engagement and views. And I think it creates a lot of short term attention. But how do you get people who want to come back to you all the time, who don't feel drained when they read your stuff, but feel really inspired? I think just thinking about it from that lens, I think whether you've been in the cannabis industry 10 months or 10 years, like you have something to share, whether it's like from your experience in the space or from your experience outside the space that you're bringing in, just sharing that because it may seem like really like it might seem really obvious to you. For example, it'd be like, oh, pitching an editor, that's something that's super obvious to me. But there are people that have never done that before.
I've never
So
done it.
exactly. So it's
Yeah.
and I don't know the first thing about running a super compliant dispensary. I've never done that. So just sharing what you know and providing those lessons learned, I think can be really helpful, just no matter what your entry point is in the industry.
Yeah, I think the story is important. I really connect when people share their stories, which is why I love this podcast when people come on and they share their story and how they came in the cannabis industry, or when I work with a new dispensary owner and they tell me, like, I got sick or I had this really bad back injury and that's how I found cannabis, or somebody in my family got sick and that's how I discovered cannabis. And it's like being authentic is a
Mhm.
great way, I think, to connect with people, and it makes it seem more real. I think in today's day and age, you have to discern between what's real and what's not, especially if we're embarking in this AI age right now. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of things that aren't really real, and like in this weird fantasy AI world. And it's like you really have to discern like who's honest, caring, versus somebody who might have an agenda or they're doing it for the money or whatever the reasons are. And who am I attracted to? Am I attracted to that negative content? Maybe some people like it and they like the drama, or I rather just really connect with someone who is honest and who is authentic and I can relate to their story and I can understand the story behind the brand or the mission.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's such a great point. And I think it doesn't mean that we can't express negativity or that it's rainbows and butterflies all the time. For
It's
me, it's just
not.
if you're going to take the time out there to post, what can you do to be the most productive? Like maybe there was something negative that happened that you learned a lesson from that you want to share with somebody else. Or maybe there was something that maybe something's gone wrong that you are looking for help with that you're just
Yeah.
like, okay, SOS. Is there somebody in my network that can help me navigate this? But again, I think it's, do you want people to leave like feeling like exhausted from reading your content, or do you want them to feel energized in a way that makes them want to keep reading your content?
Yeah.
So if you, and again, I think that comes from serving over self-serving. If you're genuinely serving others, I think you'll naturally find that path.
I love that. That was really well said. Serving versus self-serving. And you can usually feel when things are self-serving. That was great. I guess in wrapping up, like what are some best practices or any tips that you want to leave cannabis operators with that will be really helpful for them, especially with 2026, and it's going to be the year of a lot of opportunity and changes for everyone and
Yeah, yeah. Oh, such a big question. I don't know where to start. Yeah. I think one thing to share is that you do have something to share, no matter who you are in space. And finding the courage to share that with the industry or to put yourself out there to help you find that new career pivot or help you found that business or get that partnership or get that funding or just get to the next step in your business. You have experience that you can share, you have things that you can help people with, and there are other people that are willing to help you if they simply know about you. So just being not afraid to put yourself out there, I think is probably just a great like tidbit to share. Don't operate in the shadows.
yeah, I love that. That's really valuable. And it's true. I think everybody does have a story to share. And some people, they might not want to share because that's how some people are a little more shy. But I think for those who are willing to take that leap, I think it is important to share your story. And I think the more content and stories that are available for people out there, you can learn so much. I think it's better to have the information. I know a lot of cannabis operators that are like, wow, I wish I would have heard that 5, 6 years ago. It would have helped me so much. And I feel like we're evolving so much in the cannabis industry. There's a lot more information available for cannabis operators and ancillary businesses instead of just blindly going into things with no information out there, like how it was in the earlier days. So I think we are very lucky with how evolved everything is becoming in our industry. Honestly, I really appreciate you being here. You've been an amazing guest. I think just very valuable and helpful. And for anyone interested in Cassie and her green room that she recently has going on, which I think is a really helpful tool, and also Tomaselli Media, I will have her information posted in the description box with the podcast episode. And for anyone looking to stream the podcast, it's available on Apple and Spotify and wherever you like to listen. Or if you are interested, you can go subscribe and check out at Under the Microscope with Jenny on YouTube. So, Cassie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenny. This has been so fun.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all your knowledge. And I wish you a really happy new year.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Thank you.